Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner. Today, we're going to be getting into how to beat Mr. Game and Watch himself. He's been terrorizing the meta lately, so we wanted to do an episode about him, talk about the counterplay, all that jazz. So if you guys do want to support us, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know in the comments below if you think Game & Watch is underrated or overrated. And if you guys want to support us even more, go ahead and subscribe to the Discord where you can ask us questions. And before we get into the topic, we do have a question that we have in the Discord. So Ramses, why don't you go over it?
Yeah, so also came through. Appreciate the support. And they said, I myself struggle with tilting, beating Yu-Gi-Oh!, Under Night, or Smash. I can get in my own head, especially when I drop a combo I'm normally very good at hitting, or flub aligning Yu-Gi-Oh! And get a subpar end board. All the same, I can really get in my own head when it comes to that sort of thing, and it gets me tilted. How would y'all deal with playing while tilted, and what suggestions do you all have to try and get out of tilting as soon as possible as to not affect the current match you would be in? Thanks again, and to everyone watching or listening, the Discord is a great way to support Smash University. Dude, also went all out. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Alto.
Hell yeah.
What do you think, Charles? How do you handle tilt? I know you've worked with like really top level players, and emotions can get pretty high. And I think especially Tweak had like an era in which he really suffered from like tilting in mid game. What was you guys' approach to handling tilt?
I think for me, it's the main thing. Meditation helped a lot. I think just for anyone that I've talked about tilting with, I think just being in the present. I know we talked about that in some of the previous episodes, and how meditation can really help, because it's all about being in the present, right? Whenever you're tilted, you're thinking about something that happened in the past and you're harping on it. And even it's even to the point where, for me personally, I would play friendlies and I would like verbally complain about dumb shit in the game. But I make it a goal of mine now that when someone falls out of like a fox up air, or like down air doesn't fully connect, or something, a hurt box shift happens, like you can put energy into being upset about the said thing that happened. Or if you're focused and you're more concerned about what's happening right then and there, then it's a lot easier to just make the play, right? Because if so, say like Fox up air 1 connects, but up air 2 doesn't, you might not have the most frame advantage, but you still want to be ready for the next scenario, right? If you're putting energy into even speaking, then you're probably not ready for the directional air dodge that they panicked, and then Fox could have up smashed or something like that, right? So it's all about being in the present, and specifically with card games too. I think I have a decent amount of experience competing in not like a bunch of different card games, but a decent amount of card games. So with card games, it's like you make a mistake, and instead of just harping on the mistake that you made and what you could have had, you need to look at your resources and be like, how do I win with this board state? Or how do I win with the resources in my hand and stuff like that, right? And even though sometimes it's impossible, sometimes if you just fuck up, you lose no matter what. But it's more of like going through the motions of being like, how can I win with whatever resources I have right now? To me, the backbone of it really comes down to if your priority and your most concern is all put into the present, then it's a lot harder to get tilted. So I think that's the backbone of not being tilted, is just constantly being in that mindset of, hey, like I make mistakes, or everybody makes mistakes, but it's more so the people that are able to get themselves out of those mistakes are people that stay in the present, and they always want to understand and they want to know how they can win in their current situation. And just, to me, it all stems off of that. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get that. I think that a lot of times for me, when I look at just how people are like playing, like it's okay. You need to understand that something's going to happen, right? Whether it's like a personal mistake here, like, you thought this was going to hit this way, whatever it may be. And it's like those things are going to occur. But I always try to explain like how much of that moment is going to take away more moments, right? Like, are you going to allow that time to be extended more than it has to be, right? It's a mistake. Why would you want to extend that? And that's what you do when you're thinking, right? When you're just consistently thinking about it. And so I always try to like preach to understand, like, hey, by allocating more time to a moment that was already bad, you're losing out on more moments where you could actually make that change, right? And so the optimal thing is, yeah, we can talk about that later. We can get upset about that later. But right now, you have agreed to play this game. All the things that you see in the game, you have agreed to, right? So it's not time to sit around and be upset. You know, when you're done and reflecting, yeah, you can reflect and be like, man, that's stupid as shit that's in the game. Sure, whatever. But like, I always say, like, hey, when you agree to the game, you agree to the game, right? So now take all that time and push it towards that. Take what you can, and move on from that moment, because you should not extend out a moment that was unfavorable to you. That's just stupid. So I try to look at it from that aspect when I'm like explaining to students.
Yeah. I think you guys covered a lot of like the mental facilities. I think kind of going back last week, we talked about IPS, ideal performance state, right? Or the week before, depending on when you watch this. So we talked about ideal performance state, and we kind of divided it into like physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, right? And so I think Charles and Bam kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of your mental capacity. I think in terms of your focus, you should always be focusing on the present. I think what you should be looking into, though, if you're getting tilted, is the underlying emotional issues, because oftentimes there's some sort of emotion tied to your attachment to whatever happened that tilted you. And so what you often find is that, like, for example, oh, I didn't hit a combo that I normally hit. Okay, I feel entitled to hitting it. Or maybe there's like a mini like trauma. I know it's like an extreme word, but you've lost a lot of tournament sets before because you dropped like important combos. And so when you're in that situation, you get like that feeling of dread where you're like, oh, I should not drop this combo. And that pressure causes you to drop it in the first place, right? And so when you find yourself getting tilted, something that I really recommend is investigating the emotional cause. So what emotions are related to the tilt? And so tilt by itself, it's just frustration, right? I think tilt and frustration are essentially the same term. We just gamify it. But frustration is often a masking of sadness. In the same way that anger is, right? So when you're angry, you're really just like sad and you want to change something. That's essentially what anger is. And so when you're frustrated, it's a form of anger. And so when we're angry, we're sad. And so if we're sad, we got to figure out, okay, what makes us sad about like dropping a combo? Like, and of course, like these are extreme terms. Like I'm not saying like you're crying your eyes out because you're dropping a combo. But at the end of the day, there's some sort of like disappointment in yourself. Maybe it's like confirming an insecurity, or you feel like it is, or like I said, maybe you feel entitled, etc., etc. There's some sort of like pattern that your brain is recognizing. There's a lot of different causes for tilt, for frustration, and so what I generally recommend again is to reflect on these moments and ask yourself essentially like, what is the emotional experience related to the frustration, and try to fix that. And so there are two elements to fixing tilt. One is prevention. And so fixing the emotional element of it is prevention. And two is solving when you're in the game. And so that is more of what Bam and what Charles talked about. When you find yourself in the moment and you find yourself tilting, how do you pull yourself back in? Is by focusing on the present. And so huge shout outs to them. I think they really tackled the problem well. Tony, what would you like to add to the subject of tilt?
Well, I think everyone else has covered every single detail I could add to what tilt is. For solutions, a couple of things that have worked for me personally in the past is the first is to externalize the problem and ask yourself, what is the game actually? So what is it that I think the game is supposed to be, and why is that not lining up with what the game is? So similar to what everyone has said prior, but the idea here is to kind of have a model of the game in your mind that exists outside of yourself. Like, what would you view the game as a spectator? And then is it possible for you to spectate that game even though you're in the game? And so the idea is this is actually a separate skill that you have to practice, that externalizing without taking things personally and without saying, oh, well, player A or B should win. If you don't care who is going to win, because the better player does not always win, then you suddenly lose part of that attachment to it because you aren't thinking to yourself, oh, well, I need to win or I should win or things like that. It's just a matter of player A or player B is going to win. Whoever wins, it doesn't matter. All that matters is what causes those wins and how we can go ahead and link ourselves to that for cause and effect, which I believe we've discussed in the mentality and technical aspect of the game video. Something else that I recommend for being productive with the situation, being productive with tilt, is to treat it as a training opportunity.
Yeah.
So pulling yourself out of tilt is a skill, but playing while tilted is a separate skill. So reducing your likelihood of being tilted is a third skill. So the idea is if you are proactively focusing yourself on what is in your control and what isn't, and what these things mean to you for whether you're playing well or not, then that reduces your likelihood to be tilted. And then recognizing the opportunity to train through tilt is, of course, the third, with everyone else having covered the second possibility very well. Once you are tilted, just focus on what do I want and how am I going to get it. Anything else doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you even get it or not. It matters whether or not you made your highest attempt to get it. Because, as I said before, the better player does not always win. Ultimately, all games are games of chance. You are never going to have, or rather, I should say, most competitive games are not games in which the better player wins 100% of the time. It's simply a matter of chances and odds. And then you, as a player, are a multiplicative function to that equation. And so how good you are is just you being a higher multiplier, but you're never going to be a 100%, or rather, even if you are, that is going to still not give you a 100% win rate. And so the idea here is that you simply need to do your best and recognize what it means to do your best in advance and then focus on those things. And that, I think, is the real opportunity of playing with tilt.
Yeah, for sure. And then the last tidbit I want to do is just for something that helped me a lot. And this is something that Void told me. I think I said this multiple times on the podcast, but knowing your tilt habits is something that can try to bring you back into the present. So, for example, when I get nervous or tilted, I'll just jump a lot because Fox wants to be in the air and he has a very vertical gameplay. So if I ever feel tilted or nervous, I know that I do specific things and I lose because of doing these specific things. And if I lose because I'm doing the same thing over and over again, then I'm not really learning anything. So even just realizing that you're tilted is something that can yank you back in this brain. You're like, oh, I'm frustrated right now. Now, so when I'm frustrated, I do X and Y. So as long as I do not X and Y, I'll lose the game. At the worst case scenario is you lose the game, but you didn't do X and Y. So at least you get some learning experience out of it, right? So that's another thing that Void told me that helped me a lot, and it kind of felt like definitely sticked. So
one final thing I'd like to say, because I think this is interesting too. I think tilt is also pretty closely related to like flow state. And so if you think about flow state, it's actually not just like a binary thing. If you're at home, you want to know more, you can Google something like flow state chart, and it will show you like a chart of the various emotions related to flow state. And they are contingent on your perceived skill level and your perceived challenge level. And so what happens when you mess something up, your perceived skill level goes down while the challenge level stays the same. And oftentimes that brings you into a state of anxiety, essentially like anxious feelings. And that is a lot of the tilt. And so something that you can also do to kind of like combat the tilt in the moment is to increase your perceived skill level. And that's where we kind of go back to what Tony said, where you want to focus on what you can control. And so if you're in a frustrated mind state and you are essentially a little bit anxious or you're feeling anxious type of feelings, doing simple mix-ups, right? Like simplifying your game plan and doing things that you can succeed at, even in a negative mind state, can help you increase your own perceived skill level, because now you're succeeding at interactions. And even if you're not, you're properly interpreting them because they're so simple, right? And so that's going to increase your perceived skill level. And that in turn is going to counter some of the anxiousness. And then through that, you can kind of like resume your usual game plan. And so, what I recommend, this is something that I do with a lot of top level players that I talk with, is that they have a simple game plan. And this is something that can be as simple as like, I'm playing Joker and like I'll dash back if I think they attack, and I'll dash forward if I think they'll be passive. Like as something as simple as that. And just playing that for like literally like 3, 4, 5 interactions, just being successful there is going to get your brain back into that feeling of, okay, I am skilled, I know what's going on, and that's going to pull you out of that feeling of tilts. So that's something to read into if you want to know more about it. Flow state, there's a lot of theory about it, so recommend reading up on that if you're dealing with tilt.
I also, speaking of card games, I believe Brian DeMars wrote a fine Magic the Gathering article on tilt and how he personally dealt with it. So I recommend that for anyone who would like further reading as well.
Nice. Sounds like great resources. Damn, I am a huge fan of Magic the Gathering, so that might even be something that I read.
Same.
But let's get into the topic at hand, Mr. Game and Watch. I mean, so I'm trying to think of what order we should go in. I think the thing players would want to hear first in terms of counterplay is Neutral B at ledge, because I feel like that's the one that most lower level Game and Watches all the way up to top level will kind of go for this option because it's really safe. So, and it's definitely the option that feels like it has the least amount of counterplay depending on the character you have. Something that so let's break down the idea and like why it is a very good move. So it's a move that most Game and Watches will set up far enough away so they won't get up attacked, right? And I will say you want to try and time your ledge jump if it's possible. Now, good Game and Watches won't let you do this because they'll time the bacon. So if you keep mashing bacon. Now, the thing that makes this move broken is that even though Game Watch throws out like 4 or 5 pieces of bacon, and then there's that little pause, and then it goes into the next round, all these pieces of bacon do like, what is it, 7 or 8 damage or something ridiculous like that. And then while you're doing the move, every piece that hits you is not staling the Neutral B. That whole Neutral B sequence does not count as like separate, projectiles. It's all one entire move. So they can sit there and bacon, and if they are doing it for 12 seconds and you get hit by like 7 pieces of bacon, none of them got sailed. That all counts as the same move. So it's pretty crazy in terms of damage output. If you try to roll, you'll get burned, which sometimes is worth it. Sometimes it's worth to get burned because you might be able to, you might get sent center stage. It's not that much damage, in my opinion. And the worst thing you can do is hang on the ledge, get hit, and then they walk up. So I think the core mix-up is, do you think Game & Watch is going to continue to do the Neutral B, or do you think Game & Watch will stop Neutral B, walk forward, and force your timing of a ledge option, right? And this is something that other characters can have, right? Like Samus down B will force you to do a ledge option, right? Diddy Kong Peanut, if timed correctly, will force you to do a ledge option. There's a lot of projectiles that force your timing of a ledge option, so that's why these moves are so strong. I think Game & Watch Neutral B is the pinnacle of that move because it confirms into, like we saw Meister confirming into the down air spike this weekend against Lightning, killed him at like sub 50. So it's like, it's crazy what they can do off of it. Forward tilt is the one we usually see most top level Game & Watches go for. Very powerful move. So the thing that's broken about it is it's forcing the timing of your ledge option. Now, what you can do is, if you think Game Watch, I think Shattuck did this a couple times, which I really liked, is if you feel like the Game Watch is going to walk forward, then you just rip the get up attack. Obviously, that's risky, and like I said, the main mix is, do you think Game Watch is going to stop baconing and move forward? So you can react to the Game & Watch like not baconing and moving forward, but Game & Watch also has a really good run shield. So he might bait you out and you might get up attack a shield, which you're going to take a massive punish for. But I think the main thing is understanding why it's strong. And if you have a disjoint on some kind of aerial, another thing you can do is ledge drop into a aerial swing to clank out the bacons, and knowing what moves you can use to hit the bacon and win is very, very important, especially if you're coming off the ledge. So that's kind of my breakdown of how to beat out bacon. And then sometimes it's like you can try to ledge jump over it, and at least it puts you in a more awkward position where you're not going to get hit by a grounded option. Back air is still obviously really good, but at least you're checking the Game & Watch, so they're not just autopiloting, walking up and forward tilting at a certain time, right? So I would say those options to me feel like the best. What are your thoughts, Bam? Bam? Ramses, Ramses, what are your thoughts?
So my opinion on I think you actually handled what to do when you're on the ledge very well. I think something that you want to consider is the dimension of what to do before grabbing the ledge. And so the biggest weakness of the chef, of bacon, chef, whatever, is the pause in between. I think it's five bacons, pause, 5 bacons, right?
Yes,
and so what you generally want to at maximum, right? And so what you want to do is you want to maximize your ledge invincibility by essentially trying to delay your recovery for as much as possible. And what that will do is that will allow you to essentially mix up more timings because you are invincible while the bacons are coming down to the ledge. And so having that extra option allows you to then essentially time your jump in between that pause. If the game watchers go for it, if they cancel early, of course, like there is a mix up there. But I recommend kind of starting off a set by trying to delay the ledge grab and seeing if you can use the extra invincibility to find a window of timing in their bacon pattern. Now, if they start delaying their neutral B, you can instead recover quickly and then jump before they have time to set up the bacon. And so to me, the essential mix-up is one of timing, where if you delay, you have more mix-ups. And if they want to hard counter that, they would have to delay themselves, and them delaying allows you to recover early and kind of like sneak through. Of course, there are mix-ups there are feints, there are single bacons, etc., etc. But I think there's a lot of value in forcing the Game Watch to pay attention to this stuff, because mental stack, forcing them to pay attention to this means they're not paying attention to other things. If you have the ability to recover high, you can always try that, even though of course Game & Watch's juggling is arguably the best in the game, if not the best. And so it's a choice where you're deciding on a little bit of a worse situation to avoid the risk of like bacon forward tilt, which can, put you in a near guaranteed death situation if your recovery is bad, because Game Watch actually has pretty good offstage with the back air too. And so consider the dynamic of when you grab the ledge when playing around bacon. I think that's a really, really important part. What do you think, Tony?
Oh,
so the first thing that
real quick, just for the viewers that don't know, the longer you're airborne and then you grab the ledge, you just have more intangibility.
Yeah.
So that's why things like Bowser Flame Breath or Charizard Flamethrower, if someone hits you really close to the ledge or as you're about to grab the ledge, it's from when you got hit. So if Bowser Flame Breaths you and then you get hit by it and then you up B right to the ledge, you're not going to have a lot of intangibility because you just got hit and then you grabbed the ledge not even a second later, so you're going to have the lowest amount of intangibility on ledge. So the longer you're airborne after you're getting hit, the longer you have ledge intangibility. That's going to be really key to what the Ramses' explanation. So just I'm assuming most of the viewers know that, but just in case you didn't.
So the first thing to note is that there's actually few different sausage setups from the pan, and it depends both on timing and also horizontal spacing. And then technically there's vertical spacing because Game & Watch can tilt the arc of the sausage, but generally that's just going to affect the cone, and that's not a huge deal in practice. So ultimately, also quick clarification on getting hit by sausage. Sometimes it is important to take a hit from sausage if it is in an earlier sausage from a batch. And specifically, you want to take that in a way that doesn't then combo into a cluster of sausages. But the idea there is you don't want to get hit off stage by the last sausage or the second to last, usually because they're usually paired close to each other. So the idea there is that sometimes, similar to being ledge trapped by Samus, you need to just take the bomb and use it to get additional time to sequence your ledge grab so that it is not timed optimally for Game & Watch's setup. Next thing to note is that Game & Watch's setup either covers roll or it hits off stage, but not usually both. The idea here is that a lot of characters' rolls can actually go past the pan. And as Charles mentioned, you can intentionally take the hit and get sent towards center. to just escape the situation with a percent tax. If you can do that, by all means, you should. What you want to do is you want to pay attention to the positioning before Game & Watch even throws the first sausage, or rather during when he throws the first sausage, to recognize how he is spaced and whether or not that's going to reach off stage. Because if it's not, and you can just ledge hang, then usually you can just wait a little bit and then try and time, or even regrab, so that you can reset your ledge grab and just take it as a normal ledge trap. And this isn't always a direct win, because Game & Watch actually has solid ledge trapping even without Sausage Pan. But the idea here is that you want to line up that timing opportunity until you can either get that ledge roll, or what'll happen is eventually Game & Watch will back up a little bit so that he is focusing the sausage so that the furthest it goes is going to cover roughly your neutral get up spacing, which coincidentally is also your ledge jump spacing. So at this point, you want to use your ledge jump ideally, or depending on the arc of the overall sausage, if you think you can get up because it'll whiff on the back of your shield. It's very hurtbox independent, or sorry, hurtbox dependent. There's a lot of feel that goes toward getting up into the sausage arcs. And on top of that, the sausage arcs aren't consistent. So sometimes you'll still see players get up into it thinking, yep, I'm safe. And even the good ones who are just slay Game & Watches will just get up into it and still get hit. But the idea is generally what you want to do is you want to ledge jump, fade, depending on your character's recovery, you can usually fade back a bit so that what your goal here is generally to use your ledge jumps intangibility to effectively parry one of the second to last sausages and then drift around so that they're whiffing around you, and then you can either double jump or you can use something. Obviously, if you're using a character like Sonic, you can just go ahead and spin shot over. And because he is whiffing sausage, he is not in he can't use that time to go ahead and start up air pressures to cut off your trajectory or zone you out from there. Characters like Steve can also use this well. Basically, any character with a very fast air dash. So this can include characters.
Diddy.
Well, even characters like Pit, because we typically don't really think of Pit as doing that, but he can use an up B to go over. And even though he's not going to get an advantageous position from this, usually it's enough that he can do something like go toward center on like Battlefield or something of that nature and get a neutral reset and skip corner pressure as a punish. So it's a positional punish, but it does get you out of there, and you're not going to lose the game just having that. So whenever you see, as a rule of thumb, if I'm seeing someone getting caught off stage because their ledge hang is getting caught by sausage, it was a position they could have rolled. And if they're getting their ledge jumps hit, usually you'll see like Mia, for example, he likes to use sausage, and then he'll go for back air. And usually the reason he's doing that is because he is specifically anticipating that they are going to go for a ledge jump. And so he's setting it up and then putting out a back air at the time that they would have ledge jumped. And that's why
the first two bacons are a feint, essentially.
Exactly. And so because these mix-ups don't cover everything, but they look so similar at the start, that's why so many people get shut down. You just have to recognize the horizontal spacing, and then from there, Game & Watch can still mix up the duration of what he's going for on top of that and use get up timing. And you'll see Meister in particular, for example, likes to, when he goes for the short stop on the sausage, usually what he's looking for is something like down smash to punish your neutral get up if he's expecting that, because obviously down smash barrier into forward smash is gonna get a mid % KO, and Meister is all about pushing his punishes, where as opposed to Mia, who is about pushing the positions.
Yeah. All right. So I think we covered the neutral beat at ledge very well. It at surface level, it's like it feels like, oh my god, Game & Watch is just spamming neutral B by roll, but there's a bit more layers to it, and it depends on the character's options and stuff like that. Even things like bats within, we see Lima use that. Like Bayo has a ton of ways to get around bacon at ledge, so you don't even get to see it that much in the matchup. So, and then even bats within on the up air. So I guess we can talk about the other broken advantage state about Game & Watch, because I think overall, Game & Watch's advantage state is what feels like is putting him in this part of the meta. I don't think he necessarily has a bad neutral. I think his neutral is pretty strong, and we will get into that. I think players have been doing a fantastic job at playing against Game & Watch and neutral, particularly neutral. But we'll get into that later. But we'll go into juggling. Juggling, I mean, Ramses already said it. Probably the best juggling in the game, and if not the best, like top 3 or something like that. Just the damage output is a lot. It's a multi-hit projectile as well, so it's a bit harder to clank through the move. I know things like Blade Beam and stuff like that we saw at Collision this weekend, like Mute Ace kind of like neutral-airing Blade Beam and stuff like that. It's a little harder to swing through Game & Watch up air because of the multi-hit aspects of it. There is probably characters that can do it, but most cannot. Most characters, you're just going to try. You can't outmash it, right? You have to try and air dodge it. So what I recommend, now it depends on your character's stats. So I'm privileged in a sense that I play Fox. So I have a reflector and I have the best fast fall neutral air dodge in the game into a reversal situation, right? Or one of the best. The fact that I'm the fastest faller, and fast fallers have very good neutral air dodges, and Fox is a frame 2 air dodge. So pretty good in that sense. Obviously the matchup's still pretty rough, but Fox in general is probably one of the harder characters to juggle in the game, because you always have to respect his mash down, and then you always have to respect neutral air dodge fast fall into some kind of reversal, because there's not a lot of end lag on neutral air dodge in Smash Ultimate. Now if you're a floaty character, let's take something like Mute Ace, right? Playing Peach. So Peach is going to be a little bit harder. You have float to stall out. So I think stalling is another good option. So you have reflectors. Does your character have a reflector? Because if you can reflect the up air, and then most of the time you can combo off of it, right? If Game & Watch gets hit by it. So do you have a reflector? Yes or no? Are you a fast faller with a good neutral air dodge? Yes or no? Do you have some kind of stalling option? Peach float, stuff like that, right? So these external resources, and even things like horizontal air dashes, right? That can be something that forces Game & Watch to run towards the center of the stage instead of falling up airs towards the center of the stage. And if you see Game & Watch, he's not the fastest character. So when they commit to something like that, you can fast fall down. You're still cornered, but kind of forcing Game & Watch to broaden the area where he throws out up airs, right? Do you have multiple jumps to stall out, right? So that's why characters, like Diddy Kong or Meta Knight, they have these things, but they still get juggled really hard by Game & Watch or even PT. You have switch, but you're not really moving anywhere after the switch, so you're still going to get hit by something. Diddy Kong, you have flip jump, or not flip jump, monkey flip, but at the end of the day, your air mobility is really bad. So it really comes down to, are you monkey flipping or are you not? And then if they guess right on that 50-50, it's really bad from there, right? So keeping all these things in mind, that's going to be the main thing. You just, and another thing, getting hit by rising up air, not the end of the world. You really just don't want to get hit by falling up air, because falling up air is going to be like, depending on a platform, another falling up air into an air, or falling up air, rising up air, up B, or something like that, right? So it's the main thing you want to avoid is falling up air. And then on top of that, Game & Watch's neutral air is specifically strong in the juggling position because the hitbox starts on top. So in neutral, you can actually beat out Game & Watch's nair by just throwing out a burst option, because it's very, I like to compare Rob nair and Game & Watch nair because it takes time to set up, right? Rob nair starts in the back, you need startup time, and then it comes forward, and then you have that horizontal threat, right? So for it to have horizontal threat, it just takes time to do that. Game & Watch might be a little quicker when it gets the horizontal threat, but to me, they both take setup time. But when Game & Watch is juggling, that's when nair becomes insane, because the hitbox starts at the top. So you don't even need the setup time. And then obviously nair does a ton of damage. So the two main moves you're trying to avoid is nair and up air. And I really, really suggest that if you don't have some of these special things that we talked about in your character, you probably don't even want to fuck with Game & Watch juggle games. Like, just go to ledge, take the bacon ledge trap. You honestly, if you're not a fast faller, if you don't have a good neutral air dodge, if you even reflector, disjoints can kind of help. Some kind of stalling option. Airspeed, right? Like Jigglypuff or something like that, right? Wario is going to be a little harder. Wario can go high as well, and then kind of juke left and right. So if you don't have these things, you probably just want to go to ledge. and the fact that that's the counterplay if you don't have these set things,
Crazy.
it's very fucked up. But I don't know if anyone else had any extra thoughts on Game&Watch juggling.
So my understanding of Game&Watch is that he has two very strong advantage states in his juggle and his ledge trap. And we've discussed the ledge trap, now his juggle. The thing is, the way he leads into them is a little different. And so the thing about his ledge trap is that it actually requires a decent amount of setup for him to position well and get the bacons going, like Tony mentioned. And so generally, early on in a stock, you can play more horizontally and kind of take the dash attacks, kind of take the back airs, because he's probably not going to have enough time to set up a ledge trap and deny you from potentially like jumping back to the stage. And so similarly, at later percents, if you play more vertically, yeah, he can juggle you, but his juggles generally do not kill, generally. And so what you want to do is you want to play towards the risk reward without, of course, being linear about it, because if you're always letting him get back airs, well, you're still going to lose. And so from there, what you generally want to establish as a mix-up is the kind of like the distinction between going to ledge and going to the corner. And so like Charles said, if you cannot like kind of break through the juggle, if you cannot brute force through, you probably want to go to ledge, but you shouldn't just kind of like passively go to the ledge every time, because now you're giving him time to set up his bacon ledge trap. And so if you're always threatening a potential reversal to the stage, you can kind of enter the ledge or kind of like get to the corner without him being able to set up bacon. And now his ledge trap and his corner pressure actually is not that scary. I personally think, and I don't know if you guys disagree, I think a lot of his corner pressure and ledge pressure is kind of reliant on having bacon set up. And so if he doesn't have bacon set up
for a kill.
Right, or being able to kill you directly. That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
so things like, just like dash attack, run up forward. So, but for most situations, it's kind of reliant on him having bacon set up. And so if you can get to the corner or get to the ledge without giving him that room because you're threatening a reversal, he becomes a lot less threatening than he normally is. And so what I generally recommend is that if he is juggling, look at what area he is looking to cover. And so like Tony mentioned, there's a huge difference between Meister and Mia here, where Meister is willing to kind of like chase you and call you out in the juggle, and because of that get a huge amount of reward, whereas Mia is very happy to just like control the center, play the position from center, force you into the corner, and just like very solidly kind of like choke you out like that. And so if you see the Game&Watch being more willing to commit, you can try to force reversals and play that mix-up if you were under kill pressure anyway, right? Because you go to the ledge, you can die. You brute force for your juggle, you can die. The risk reward is similar enough that it is a viable option. However, if the Game&Watch plays like Mia and decides to cover the center most of the time, not saying Mia's like 100% consistent, but that is the general approach, right? If the Game&Watch prefers to cover the center most of the time, just take the free corner and play the corner pressure from there. And generally, you'll be all right. Outside of that, I think a big thing about getting around his juggle as well is to be careful when you are retreating to the corner that he doesn't call out your passive retreat with like a back air. And so that is kind of where things get scary, is if you say, I'm going to just take the corner because he's controlling the center, and you get a full hop back air, that could be a really, really awful spot. So really, really be wary for that, as well as being wary of essentially the up B burst range, which is also a threat. Generally less threatening if he hits with the tip of the up B at like a mid to high percent. But do keep in mind that it can send you to in really nasty angles if you're not ready to DI it. So be careful of those two options while you're disengaging from the juggle. Any other takes in the chat?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was just gonna add, like, I agree, right? Like, I think
back.
Yes, I'm back. I'm alive. I exist.
Majin Bam is back.
I missed him, bro.
He mains Game&Watch now.
Common Bam is back if you like having Bam back.
Stupid. But yeah, like for Game&Watch, I love that you point out that, like, yeah, even though he is good at those two states, right, and those states seem to flow really well into each other, right, there's kind of a distinctive difference he needs to make when he's looking for that kill option, right? Like you said, like, where it's either he has to go there and kind of buy time, or he has to read that you think that he's just going to be biding time, because he can't get anything proper from his like ledge trap unless he has time to set up bacon, and so he like jumps out there and hits you with a bear, right? But it's like a very distinctive difference between the two. which like I think helps. That should really help discern what option you should take at the time, right? I don't think he's like insanely crazy, like fast enough in order where he can like really just read that mid play, right? He has to make a kind of focus, right? He has to make all right, I'm gonna commit here for this option. And so I think it's good that you called that out big time. And I think, the only option outside of that where it's kind of like he can play both, so to speak, get the damage and potentially set up a kill is really like that tipper up B. Because like you said, it hits him out. And then if it hits him out at the right angle, depending on your DI, that's kind of when he gets enough time to set up bacon, you know what I mean? But that's also a tool they can use as a juggle. But I think like independent of that, like it's really these like kind of jump back areas of them reading kind of your passiveness. So I think those are huge points for people who are looking to be better against Game and Watch, right? Because there's certain damage that you're just going to take from Game and Watch with just a combination of the up B, how the transition into the juggle, the up air, and you have to accept that. And I think a lot of times what happens is people won't be okay with accepting some of that part of the poison of Game and Watch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Game and Watchers are preying on that. They want to see that moment when you're like, oh man, I'm taking so much damage. Let me DI this way or get here. And then they're like,
Let me just hit the air dodge button. And they're like,
let me just get this button. And that, thank God, because that's what I needed down smash, right? Like bear. Like they're like, don't ever, like for people who are watching, like don't ever forget, like they get damaged this way, but they're not going to kill that way. It's eventually they have to hope that you feel pressured enough about this stuff to make that decision to want to avoid that, and then you end up picking the wrong poison. And that's like a very classic 1-2 of like Game and Watches, right? And how they can convince you to do so. So I think it's a really good call out, and hopefully people take that to heart so they can be better in the matchup. Because I think that's a really huge thing for people. You will play much better against Game and Watches just understanding that factor.
So, as the Coach's Corner resident Game Watch down player, I think that the thing about Game Watch's juggling is that it's the best in the game when it's good. And
for damage, right? Like it's
it's good for damage, and then at later percents, you're always going to get something from it. So I think Game Watch is one of the I don't want to say best balanced because that connotates something different than what I mean, but the idea is whenever one of his doors closes, a different door opens. And even essentially every single time something stops confirming, it's at the almost exact percent that a new confirm opened up. And so Game & Watch is what he's looking for essentially is constantly changing by percent, but it all, as per usual, looks the same, which is I think in general, what is so strong about Game Watch is that everything looks the same. Unless you are specifically like stopping to analyze it and essentially learning the character like you play him, everything just looks the same. His ledge animations look the same. His up airs, what he's looking for, they all look the same. In practice, though, they are changing, and you can generally read what he's going to be looking for next based on the percent and based on the position of where he's looking for things at the percent. And this includes up air, because one of the things that is really strong about it is that when you get hit by one, especially like lower mid percents, it feels like you just get hit by the whole kitchen sink. As you are willing to take hits and control where you're hit by up air and when you're hit by up air, which parts, this changes because Game Watch's confirms are not quite so easy that you can just get them while you're in your sleep. There's actual context that applies for when things are going to connect and when things won't. So using hitting like a Peach Snare or say Fox Snare or something of that nature, the idea is sometimes you actually do want to get hit by the last hit of the up air, but you want to do so in a way that minimizes the punishment you're taking. And by that I mean, like as Charles said, they're very good for adding on percent if you are intentionally clanking with the early parts of the up air and then getting hit by the last part so that it essentially double jumps you without spending your resources. Then you can use that to essentially position yourself and control when you are coming down on Game & Watch, where you are going to DI that up air to. And the idea is you are essentially allowing yourself to just double jump for a few percent. And so the question here is, would I be willing to take a Fox laser if it gave me unlimited double jumps? Yes, you probably would. Every character probably would. It's a matter of context and controlling when you're engaging with Game&Watch and what places on the stage, usually vertically, those are. So you don't want to just air dodge the up airs. You want to specifically recognize when Game&Watch is going to have to rise to cover you, and that's when it's time to look for air dodges. If Game&Watch is going for a fall, then even if you air dodge, you're just going to get caught on the landing. But if he is coming down with landing, then you can usually do something like double jump over it. That's when you can burn your peach float to go over, because he's landing. He can't pursue you or catch your drift. And so the question is, how good is Game&Watch's juggling when he's whiffing his initial juggle tool or even the second juggle tool? So think about where the up air is going to place you. Are you DIing it in or away? As everyone mentioned before, you can just DI it out and take the ledge trap instead. But usually what you'll see when you see the players who are generally recognized as punching above their weight class against Game&Watch, you are going to see them intentionally take 2, even 3 up airs. They'll take maybe 10%. And all of a sudden, the Game&Watch just seems to make a mistake. It's usually not just a matter of the Game&Watch making a mistake. It's a matter of the player waits until they can find a juggle cone of their drift. So we discussed it before, but the idea is there's generally a cone where you're drifting. You can either continue to go straight down, or you can continue your forward momentum. And so you can choose whether you are moving forward from the knockback of the up air by DIing it in or away. And then using that, you can control your cone. If it doesn't look like a good cone, you can intentionally take an up air to try essentially that high recovery again. And so this can set you up for a position where something I remember being revolutionary when he started applying it was Zomba's high recoveries with Rob, with up B. And the idea here is that even though it's just Rob coming down, even in matchups where characters could normally juggle him well, we would see that it became so much more ambiguous when he's coming up from this high up, because the cone is so wide that it's really difficult to just, as a human, it is difficult to cover that many positions and places, especially because it's not like the rest of the cast when they're recovering vertically. So it's a very different kind of cone, and it's a different kind of skill, essentially, even though it looks the same, as per usual. And so the idea here is you can Game&Watch by just choosing which cone you're going to actually make a recovery for and try and land on the platform, instead of just trying to auto recover and go through a setup that he's used to. So Game&Watches are generally used to 2-3 layers of juggling, maybe even up to 5. If you're taking like your 10th one hit of up air, you've taken maybe 20%. Yeah, that's a decent juggle percentage, but once you get to top level smash, 20% is nothing. That's
inconsequential.
Yeah. And so what you don't want to do is you don't want to land on top of Game&Watch while he's trying to actually bait you out into an air dodge so that he can get an up smash, so that he can land a forward air. Because as Ramses mentioned, his juggles don't KO very well. When you see Meister or Mia getting a KO, generally it's either with maximum stage position, like you're almost in the blast zone when they hit you, and it's usually with their safer neutral tools that are already staled at this point, things like Nair, things like forward air. But the thing about Game&Watch forward air, which I'm sure we'll get into, is he can't actually catch you with forward air without moving his hurt box into your face first. So the idea is he has to overshoot with his hurt box in order to overshoot with it. So usually what you'll see is he just has to commit a lot more than you would expect a character of that caliber to do so in order to reach you with his actual mobile kill moves. And so he's usually forced into doing things like back air, which I know we mentioned about his bacon ledge trap. The thing here is, if his up B isn't killing you or taking your double jump away when you just double jump over where his back air range is, then he has to convert that into a juggle position. If you have still kept your double jump, then the whole time you're willing to take 2-3 up airs and save your double jump until he's finally out of position, because he had to use like a rising up air to catch you on a confirm or catch where you're drifting to. And once he does that, you can just double jump, maybe neutral air dodge through the that last up air and just recover onto a top platform, go for center stage, etc., etc. So the idea is take your time. Don't think of up air as being a losing position. Just think of it as being, or rather, I'm losing the game if I'm here. Think of it as just being like a poison swamp or piranha plant poison, where, yeah, I'm not going to win the game if I stay here the whole time, but if my opponent is trying to act like they control the game because they have here, then they're just going to get reversaled. And so take your time, play with it, choose which parts of the hits you're taking, and mess around with it. It can be very fun, actually, to kind of metagame with it when you're not playing for rent. So that's nice.
It is fun. It is fun to get hit by the final hit up air and just like come down all the time. And eventually the game, because here's the side, like what Bam talked about kind of comes back in. The game watcher waiting for you to commit. And so if you let yourself just kind of like get stuck in a juggle, a lot of the times they will eventually commit because they have this expectancy, like this expectations of getting like high reward out of a juggle, because that's what they normally get. And so if you deny them the high reward, they will try to chase you for it. And so the longer you keep your composure, the more likely they are to lose it.
Yeah, and I think Game&Watch, I would say on average, if you don't give Game&Watch a air dodge reset on a juggle where Game&Watch gets to go into a smash attack or something like that, average KO percent at ledge, bacon forward tilt, maybe like 110, 120. That move is probably the most broken thing about Game&Watch that gives them consistency, because if you didn't have that bacon in the forward tilt, this character would be killing on average at like 150 plus, with like, because as long as you stay center stage, back air ain't gonna kill you for a long time. Like if you can avoid bacon forward tilt or just getting forward tilted at the edge in general, you're going to survive for very long periods of time against this character at top level. So not interacting with smash attacks and not getting forward tilted at ledge, and like I said, that's the thing that in my opinion really pushes this character to being very viable at the top level, because if played correctly, if you're getting to 150 plus and you're having Game&Watch have to do like 450 to 500 damage per game, I mean it's a lot of damage. Obviously Game&Watch spits out damage, but really just making the Game&Watch work for it instead of over respecting, I think, is the main theme of the juggle, right? Do not over respect the juggle, and do not be so scared to take 5 damage from up air, or even don't be scared to take 30 or 50 damage, right? Like at the end of the day, it's better than losing the stock. And I think really you got to break down when you're losing stocks to Game&Watch, because you should be losing stocks to Game&Watch on average, 120, 110 to like 150, 160, unless your character gets edge guarded by Game&Watch. And well, if that happens, well, you're shit out of luck. I can't really give advice to, like, I think Game&Watch is one of the crazier off stages in the game. B reverse up B, back air, RAR down air, or just run off down air. Just really solid tools at the very least to do damage, and can also get really early stocks. So I don't want to deep dive too much into counterplay against Game&Watch's offstage. We do have a offstage or an edge guarding video if you guys want to check that out on how to edge guard, but that can also pertain to how to recover as well against certain tools. But I think the next thing, there's 2 more topics I want to cover real quick, is neutral and playing your advantage state against Game&Watch, abusing his disadvantage, which he has a pretty good disadvantage. We can go over his ledge getup, his normal getup, probably the best normal getup in the game. Very hard to react to because of the animation. My only advice to that, and this is something that changed the Fox Game&Watch matchup to actually be viable. Like I don't think Fox could win this matchup if he didn't have the sour dash attack to back air. So having a meaty option, and the point in when you react is as soon as Game&Watch does any type of animation from the ledge. So usually against normal getup, you can wait and see the normal getup animation and then react, which gives you consistency because you can decipher if it's roll or normal getup, right? But with Game&Watch normal getup, I tell players to react right when you see Game&Watch do some type of movement off the ledge. You just have to guess, which is what makes Game&Watch's normal getup so broken, is you can't actually react to the normal getup part. You just have to see him do an animation, and you have to just be like, all right, I'm going to throw out this meaty option. I hope it's normal getup. So obviously Fox has the privilege of having sour dash attack, which confirms in the back air, which now you're killing Game&Watch at like 80 to 90%, which is a huge game changer in that matchup. Not every character is going to have some kind of meaty option that confirms into a KO. So, I mean, I'm just giving people the time and when they need to react, and you want to have a meaty option to react with. So that's my big thing against normal getup. And then obviously juggles. I know Ramses mentioned this before the show started. The crazy thing about Game&Watch's down air is the fact that he's a floaty character that becomes a fast faller with a disjointed hitbox, right? So I think the main thing you want to do is abuse platforms in these scenarios. If you're on final, then just get out of the way. It's hard because he can drift very differently. He can like down air and drift here, and then or drift to the left or the right, or he can come straight down. So you generally want to get out of the way. If you do shield this move, try to read the Game & Watch so he ends up in front of you, so you get a really fat punish, right? We saw Light kind of turning his shield around or positioning his dash up shields to the point where he reads Meister's arc in his down air so he could get an up smash out of shield instead of just getting a dash tag. I mean, Fox can also up smash with punish if positioned correctly, but it all just depends, right? So I think those counterplay against Game & Watch's disadvantage is pretty simple. I don't know if you guys wanted to add anything before we jumped into neutral about Game & Watch's disadvantage state and how to abuse it.
So the first thing I'll just note about like Game & Watch's down air is that he does have an asymmetrical hitbox on the key. It is predominantly faced toward wherever Game & Watch is facing. And if you can come up behind Game & Watch, his entire back essentially is just a hurt box. There's no hitbox over there. And so even characters that normally wouldn't necessarily have an up air that's going to beat the down air, if you can hit that narrow spacing, then pretty much any up air or juggling tool that does not go wide and move through the key is still going to be able to beat that down air from the side, essentially. It's roughly 45 degrees behind Game & Watch. So I will note that. Something else worth noting is that when Game & Watch does go for down air, there is also a decent bit of startup, and then also when he lands, it's actually quite unsafe if you can get the timing for it. So there's two things that I think people let him get away with. The first, and this is everyone on Earth pretty much, is once the down air is going, there are two kinds of down airs. There's the ones that are going to have a hard landing that have the small little Quake hitbox. And then there is the version that's going to auto cancel. The version that's going to auto cancel is essentially, it has to finish so soon that it's not going to hit you, and you just see Game & Watch essentially down air to you, but there wasn't a hitbox. And so the idea is, if you recognize, also just to be clear, there's nothing Game & Watch can do to really mix up the vertical timing of this. It's just recognizing where he was when he started the down air. So if you have enough recognition on where this down air startup was, you'll know whether or not you're supposed to essentially attack him before he lands or try and go for the parry on the Quake. So even without the parry, though, I believe it's -17 or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. So it's very unsafe. You can get a consistent tilt out of shield, or if you can get the parry timing, because it is, again, a set timing. If you can get the parries in, that is going to be a -20 range. A lot of the cast have smash attacks that they can punish that down air with. And then if you think that he's going for the auto cancel version, if you're actually reacting to the startup of the down air, I'm pretty sure you're going to have enough time to drop shield and smash attack to punish, because keep in mind, he's essentially whiffing point blank into your face. And so if you recognize this, either way, you're going to get a forward smash. If you recognize and are also practiced in executing it, which the issue here, and the reason that down air is so effectively safe, is because generally what is happening is that you are seeing people wait to recognize which down air it is once it makes contact with shield. And then on top of that, especially if it's something with the landing hitbox, is you'll see players wait to recognize whether or not he is landing with the Quake hitbox. And the idea is, even something that's -17, if you're waiting to react to that window actually existing, you apply the 20 frames of input delay and human delay, and all of a sudden what was a very minus hitbox is now effectively plus. And so that's usually what happens, and it's just a matter of people aren't practicing these actual punishes directly, I think, is what the issue is.
1000%, man.
Oh, go ahead, Bam. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say like 1000%, like that, and that has happened with this move for quite some time, man. It's been
here since Brawl.
Yeah, it's been here since Brawl, bro. It's
That's a
crazy.
moneymaker right there.
Yeah, and yet they always just get away with it, and it's like, yeah, like there's never really these like insane mix-ups, and like to your point, I think most importantly, Tony, is like, yeah, it's like reactable, right, in that way based on where their spacing's at. Like it's like one result's going to come from that, you know. And it's not like this character is just like teleporting across screen and all of a sudden doing low dare. Like you can just watch the character and be like, oh, from that range, that's generally what's going to be an auto cancel, right? So yeah, I love you just like pointing that out, because that is a huge one. A lot of game watchers get away with murder and get away with situations that you should be a struggle to them at times, because it's like, hey, let me just dare back, and I'm no longer in disadvantage, right? And it's like, yeah, people are not focused on being able to, because it's a very different equation. When you're able to punish a Game & Watch for that, they got to play a whole different game, right? They have to deal with that disadvantage now, because it's not just, oh, well, let me dare because this guy's an idiot and I'm just gonna fly down to safety, and hey, I might even get an attack that'll pop them up, like that shouldn't be given for free, and then often it too many times is. So
yeah.
One thing we saw.
I have
Light
one more
do-
thing to add.
Oh,
go ahead, Charles. No,
Well,
go ahead.
one thing while we're still on there that we saw Light do at Collision is Game & Watches like to go for down air that won't hit the ledge, but it'll kind of like go past the ledge, and then it'll set up for an easy up B to ledge, so they can then do like ledge drop nair or ledge drop whatever the fuck, right? So Light did a fantastic job. I think he closed out the set with this, where he parries that down air while Meister's drifting away off stage. He parries it in the Fox down smash. Now, not every character is privileged enough to have a frame 6 down smash with the 3 frame parry, so he had like, maybe like downtime of 3 frames on that down air. But again, if it was done high enough and all Light did was run up to the ledge and shield, and then he saw the down air, it's like, okay, cool. He can't change up the speed. He's going off stage, and even in that situation, if he crossed him up inside, he still gets down smashed, right? At the very least. Or if Light is paying attention, if it goes on stage, Light can just parry forward smash or parry turnaround up smash, right? Off stage, parry down air. So in that scenario, Light ran up to the ledge and he shielded, and he was like, if he dares, he dies here no matter what. He just he has to be on point, right? So even because there are even those dares where they're kind of off stage above ledge, and they want a down air to prevent you from getting some kind of like rising back air mix up to kind of get the KO on them. So they'll use down air to essentially fast fall down so they can get a easy upbeat to the ledge. So even looking out for those down airs, if your character's fast enough and you can get there, get a parry and get some kind of punish, that it's huge. It's huge. And you again, down air most of the time is used to just reverse the situation or put them in a more favorable position. So don't let them get away with it, dude. Just don't let them do it.
Don't let them get away with it.
Don't let them get away with it, man. It's a light character, right? And it's like when you figure out those punishes, like it changes a ton of the landscape, right, for the matchup. It's like, damn, okay, I'm actually dealing with juggle damage now. And it's like, if I try to just, skip juggle situation, which usually works on 90% of people, this person's actually studied the matchup. And now if I do that, I may just die really early, right? And it's like that, you have to be able to take advantage of that. The character can't just escape disadvantage for free, like on all these things, and then you don't bother to really learn it. You got to do your due diligence and make them pay for that. And a lot of times they don't, which is why the character looks so strong in certain situations, because there's certain aspects of the game they're completely skipping, and no one's bothering to put the time and effort to punish something that is punishable.
I think one thing to add on the down air counterplay. So it's funny, talks about pairing the shockwave, which I think is excellent counterplay. I think the issue with pairing the shockwave is that you open yourself up to something like a fast fall nair, and then he gets like a landing -2 aerial, and so that can be a little bit rough. And so something that you can try as well if your character prefers this method. I think pairing the shockwave is fine. Don't get me wrong. But another approach you can try is to parry the initial like landing key. And so what you're essentially trying to do is you're turning the down air into a high-low mix-up, where if they do it low enough that you cannot react to the down air, they open themselves up to up air juggles. And if they do it so high to counter the up air juggles, you can then parry the down air itself and hit Game & Watch before he lands with the shockwave. And so that's another dynamic you can try to introduce if your character is good at that. So for example, let's say you're playing something like a Fox. You have a really strong up air, you have a really strong punish after parry, and so the dynamic makes a lot of sense. If you are playing something that doesn't have the greatest parry punishes, like a Shulk, don't do that. Do go with what Tony said and try to focus more on parrying the shockwave, for example. So that's just another approach that you can take to counter the Game & Watch down there.
just to be clear, because I didn't communicate it well, some characters actually have to parry both to parry the shockwave because there is too small of a gap. So
Yeah, you can tilt your shield. I think so. I've tested this with smaller characters. So I tested it with Young Link. So I don't know about even smaller characters, but I know for Young Link, if he tilts his shield up, you can still parry the shockwave because it hits the shield sooner.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Lab it out. Tilt
All
your
right.
shield.
So next up, we're gonna wrap things up with neutral. I think the most important thing to know about Game & Watch is one, that Nair takes setup. A short hop Nair takes the least amount of setup. We see Game & Watches like full hop, fade back, and then come in with neutral air. But they definitely Game & Watch wants to hit you with Nair. That's no secret. They get a lot of damage off of it. They get a really favorable position afterwards. So one thing that I saw that was fantastic is when Gluto beat Mia for the first time in Japan. Now Wario doesn't have the greatest like sour hit dash attack, but he was bursting Mia's short hop neutral airs. So he was hitting Mia as the neutral air was halfway through. So just the base concept of this move takes time to have horizontal threat is so important. It takes time for the fish to come out of the bowl, right? So if you hit Game & Watch while the fishes are coming out of the top of the bowl, then you're not going to. And even if you trade, remember, Game & Watch, a lot of these moves are multi-hits, so you want trades. The trades are usually going to be in your favor because you won't get sent anywhere. And if you're not doing a multi-hit as well, he's going to get sent far away. So very much so. That's, I think, the most important thing. I think Leo was doing a great job as well when I was watching this weekend when he was fighting I think he was fighting Gonz's Game & Watch, but he was parrying the last earthquake hit of back air. I think a lot of people get tripped up by that move. Short hop back air is so whiff punishable, and everybody that gets hit by, like, you're shielding short hop back air, and then you think the move's over, but then there's also that last hitbox when Game & Watch hits the ground.
Landing hit.
Yes, you can parry that landing hit, and it's not that hard. It is not that hard, and even if you think it's hard, you should practice that because when Game & Watch does a short hop back air, that is way more risky than it looks. You get the disjoint, the distance is safe, but that move should be getting at top level, I should say. At top level, that move should be getting blown the fuck back. Like, you should be getting really good punishes, no matter how good the spacing is.
And we used to talk about that in Brawl too. Remember, like back in the day, right? It's like pay attention to the turtle, and the turtle dips its head down. The box is like inactive, right? It's in there until it lands, and that was like a big thing. People were punishing it before it even landed, right? You just see the second to last hitbox, see the head go down. You're like, oh, sick, and then you go from there. So like it's funny because like that just became like a lost art, so to speak, for the character, right? Everyone forgot how that move functions, and then Barry just became good again because
it all looks the same.
Lack of knowledge. Yep.
It all looks the same.
Yeah.
Like, Game & Watch's mid-range is solid, but the Game & Watch has to take a lot more risk or set up the Nair, right? So it's easy. He either has to set up the Nair, and then once the Nair is set up, then his mid-range is crazy, right? Then he comes down, then he can hit your shield and stuff like that. So it's weird because it's this push and pull where are you the one that's going to commit into Game & Watch to stop the Nair, or are you going to force Game & Watch to commit into you with his dash attack or like a burst back air? If you outrange Game & Watch horizontally, and this is like a classic saying that sword characters do well against Game & Watch, because if you shut him down horizontally and you outrange like his back air and stuff like that, or his neutral air, then Game & Watch has to dash attack. Then Game & Watch has to like come up and do like pivot boosted forward tilts or burst back airs as they're rising short hop back airs or full hop back airs. So, or they try to navigate around your horizontal and they full hop over, they hope you swing, and then they get the set Nair up and then come down on you. So that's generally the neutral game. You're playing around those specific moves. And like when you can slow the game down against Game & Watch, it's so big. He does have a very good dash attack. He doesn't have the greatest run speed, but I think the main thing, and this is why, I mean, this is why most of the time, most people will say like Game & Watch or Luigi, mostly Game & Watch or whatever, right, is one of Fox's worst matchups, is because he shuts down vertical gameplay. The whole cycle loop of Game & Watch or of Ultimate, where it's like, I hit your shield, you shield it, you jump, I go into shield, then you hit my shield, then I jump, and then you go into shield, and then I hit your shield. That's like, year one of Ultimate, that was happening all the time. Obviously, players have broken that cycle or whatever, but just the whole vertical gameplay of Ultimate, because aerials all have like auto L canceling is turned on, so we can just smash. And then out of shield isn't the greatest in this game, like in terms of like drop shield and stuff. There's other options like parry and up B and up smash, but Game&Watch's up B is so good because it counteracts smashing. So like all of your auto L cancel stuff that you thought was crazy, except like Cloudbacker or whatever, he can up B it. And then on top of that, when you are just above Game&Watch, there's intangibility on up B. So that's the part about Game&Watch is playing around Nair, back air and stuff is a bit easier. Playing around the shield and playing around up B, I think is what most players struggle against. And just understanding that he has the verticality and he kind of forces you to play horizontal grounded footsies, essentially, is what Game&Watch forces you to do. Because if you jump too much on Game&Watch, it's just not going to work. Now, that's why I think characters that get a lot off of grab is particularly strong against Game&Watch, or that's a huge check mark that you preferably want. Because if Game&Watch is like running up and shield, he's one of the few characters that run up shield is like really, really strong in this game. He has like one of the best run up shields in the game in terms of, you know, how fast the punish is and stuff like that. So it's really hard, and I think really staying more grounded or understanding when you get a chance to jump in or when it's safe to jump in. And me personally, that's why I actually enjoy playing against Game&Watch as Fox, because I feel like it makes me a really it forces me to explore other ways of playing Fox and that are still broken, right? It's like, okay, I can't just be spamming Nair and jumping all over the place. Like, I got to take a chill pill. I got to slow the game down. I have to, you know, take my time, be more grounded, play more horizontally. So I know Game&Watch is really annoying, but I actually enjoy playing against Game&Watch because it feels like it forces me to be more fundamental and like break out of the ultimate cycle. I think what makes Game&Watch so frustrating for a lot of other players is the fact that you cannot ultimate Game&Watch. You like that ultimate Game&Watch is the most like anti-ultimate character. If you just try to do like the usual ultimate shit, I feel like Game&Watch kind of shuts it down in terms of just, I guess, mashing. But yeah, well, what are your guys' thoughts in terms of Game&Watch neutral? I know I went over a couple of moves. Fair is another move that someone should go over, because fair is fake as fuck. You should not be getting hit by fair unless it's real. It is not real unless it's falling fair. Falling fair is legit because it's super plus on shield and stuff like that. But rising fair, if you're getting hit by rising fair, like, what are you doing? Can't you just jump out of the hit or like mash out of the hit and you like won't get it? It doesn't even combo.
It doesn't even combo. No, not as far as I know.
It's
but I play
literally
Shulk. I just shield art out.
Not real.
No. So my understanding of Game&Watch neutral is okay. So we actually talked about this a lot on this podcast before. He functions as the Ramses Shoto archetype, in the sense that he has really good close range, he has really strong conversions, and he essentially is very hard to interact with because if you're wrong, you lose. And so we kind of see Game&Watch's rise simultaneous with the rise of characters such as Yoshi, Ryu, Peach, Kazuya, that all function in a similar way, where their strength is that they control the space around them very, very well. And so the dynamic, in case you haven't seen me talk about this before, just a TLDR, is that while these characters have, essentially, they go into a match without the goal of controlling the neutral. They don't go into the match with the idea of, I'm going to control the neutral, I'm going to, like, you know, decide the interactions. Their goal is that they're going to control the space around them. And so if you try to mix them up from a long range, it will not work because they are not trying to control that space in between you two. And so what long range generally does is long range controls the space in between you and the opponent. And so if the opponent's trying to control that, you counter them. That's where Samus is really strong. Now, mid-range is where Game&Watch struggles the most generally, because he cannot really control that space. The issue is he has to some degree, because if he doesn't, he gets pelted by hitboxes. And so most of the Game&Watch game plan comes down to these interactions in mid-range where you have more control, but if you're wrong, you die, essentially. The issue with GameWatch is that he only has one tool to control that range, or well, he has two. He has two tools. One is Dash Shield, which, to be fair, he has the best Dash Shield in the game in terms of frame data, as well as one of the best out of shields in the game. And the other one is Nair. And so the issue with this is that these two options don't actually like cover everything. And so if you play defensively, so let's say you dash forward to bait out an interaction and you dash back, he goes for a Nair, you get a whiff punish. He goes for a dash shield. Now you get to pressure his shield. The issue is these are insane execution checks because the Nair has a decent disjoint and only 7 frames of landing lag. And the dash shield, while you do control the situation because he's stuck in shield, if you're a little bit wrong, you're going to get frame 3 upbeat or even grabbed into a full combo. And so the issue of GameWatch isn't necessarily the counterplay in neutral. It is how clean you are in terms of executing it and how frustrated you are. So the more frustrated you are, the better of a character GameWatch becomes, which is part of why he's so good in this tournament. Another thing that I think is important, talking about like the execution check in terms of punishing GameWatch, I think Charles's comparison between Rob Nair and GameWatch Nair, it makes a lot of sense. They both take a little bit of time to come out, and there's also another commonality between them two in that they are both pretty parryable. And so the last fish for GameWatch's Nair is, I think, frame 22-ish. Not sure. Either way, that is
Close.
Reactable on anticipation. What is it? Do you know what it is, Tony?
I think it's 21.
Okay, let me double check.
No, you're right. It's 22.
It is 22.
Let's get it.
Fucking go. All right, so it's 22. And generally, if they do it landing, they don't short hop fast fall because that way it's actually like not that safe. And if they do that, generally very, very vulnerable. They generally delay their jump and then go for more of a landing there. And so if they do fast fall it, it's still reactable. It's just a little tighter. The idea is that you get a little bit of extra time to react either way. And so if they short hop fast fall immediately, you get a little bit more time to whiff punish. And if they delay it, you get a little bit more time to react and kind of like prime yourself to parry the Nair. And so that's something that you can look into as well, is to just option select the parry. If you see the Nair come out, if they drift away, you drop your shield, you cancel your shield off with like a retreating jump. You'll be entirely fine. And so I think the crux of beating GameWatch is the execution. It is not necessarily about the tools, it's mostly about the execution. And so the main counterplay that GameWatch has outside of like the Nair and the dash shield is to corner you. And so getting cornered by GameWatch, obviously a very, very bad thing. It's very hard to reversal GameWatch, but again, fighting from the corner is actually not that scary because how is he going to call you out if you're going to be, let's say, short hopping in the corner? He cannot really run up and fair you, and he can rely on Becker, but as we mentioned, Becker is kind of really punishable. And so the only way that he really advances forward, again, is dash shield, which relatively low control, and jump in there, which has a lot of defensive counterplay. And so even if you're in the corner and you think they're going to like dash shield or jump in there, you can kind of just roll in and counter both of those. And so you force them to be more passive, and that allows you more room, blah, blah. Either way, the point is there's a lot of mix up there. And being in the corner versus GameWatch is just not as bad of a thing as, let's say, a Cloud cornering you. And so playing more passive while GameWatch is playing passive himself is oftentimes kind of the way to go, because again, if you interact with him and you're wrong, you die. And so the idea is that you want to interact in very calculated ways without compromising your speed. And so that is the crux of the issue, is that if you have a hard execution check, what happens is that people play more slowly and deliberately to prepare themselves to react, to perfectly space their move, to perfectly time their landing aerial. And so that decrease in speed is where especially someone like Meister will just run in and overwhelm you. And so something that you want to keep in mind in this dynamic is that if you are not skilled enough at the matchup, if you're not familiar enough, or if your execution is off on the day, et cetera, that you keep in mind that the GameWatch can always up the tempo and kind of like overwhelm you for playing too slowly because you're not executing as cleanly at a faster pace. And so at that point, you're going to have to try to play a little bit more strategical in terms of your counterplay. So instead of looking at the individual interactions, you want to say, oh, GameWatch is playing more quickly. How do I counter that? And that's where, for example, the bursting, like Charles said, comes in really, really big. So that's a general gist of my understanding of how to play against GameWatch. What do you think, Tony?
So I think that the first step to understanding Game&Watch neutral is just looking at his up B out of shield, because that's ultimately where the buck stops, is just he can hold shield, wait for you to mash something, because like Charles said, generally the base play of ultimate is to be proactive and attack. So Game & Watch essentially is the controlling element here with just up B out of shield. So the first thing you need to recognize is that there's actually a mix-up within the mental stack of how to use Game & Watch up B. Is he reacting to you jumping? Is he reacting to you touching his shield? And so the idea here is if he's waiting to react to how you touch his shield, then you can do something like empty jump in and just actually grab him, and that should work. If you still get hit right away doing this, then he's probably responding to your jump squat itself. And so the idea here is that what you can do is you can actually do something like empty hop, and then he will bait out an up B, and then from there you can actually just punish the up B, except this is also an execution test, because even though this is a very punishable thing and that any character with a even decent full hop up air can just consistently punish it, the idea here is that you have to actually practice doing it. It's not quite so easy that you can do it just on your first try. And so the next element to this is that if Game & Watch knows that you're going to do one of these two things that isn't putting out a hitbox, then what's stopping him from setting up on you? And so the idea here is that Game & Watch can mix up by going ahead and just setting up one of his slow aerials, and which is all of them actually in this case. So Game & Watch has a fundamental weakness in that he has no actual fast aerials that are going to threaten in front of him. The fastest aerial he has is Nair, but as Ramses said, the laning hitbox is not going to be present until like frame 22. I think the second, which is still only going to cover like short hop area, is going to be like frame 17. And so the idea here is that what if your neutral was essentially like 3 different shulk back airs? And so it doesn't really matter which one it is. If you recognize he jumps and you recognize the actual jump squat animation with him facing you, you can always beat it out air to air, ground to air. It doesn't matter. He has no hitbox there. There's nothing to stop you. You just have to hit him in time. The problem here is that you have to hit him so quickly that even though it's possible, in reality, the only players who can do that are essentially the most athletically reactionary players we have on the planet. And so this is where it is reactable, technically, but in practice, you have to be essentially a world-class athlete in order to make that reaction. But that is what it comes down to. And so I actually do want to go ahead and give credit to, I think it was originally Cola that I picked this up from back when he was originally playing Meister years ago. And that I was trying to figure out how Cola was countering Game & Watch forward air, and I realized that he was just consistently batting out Meister's jump squat. And so I thought about it and I was like, well, why isn't he ever getting hit for this? Why are there no false positives? And it ultimately just came down to Cola set a reaction checkpoint for jump squat and just got that consistently.
Forward facing jump squat.
Yes, forward facing jump squat. And so the idea here is that Game & Watch either has to use forward facing jumps or back air, except he does not really get follow-ups off of back air. And as everybody mentioned before, it's not safe. So if you can open him up into doing that to essentially shut this down, you can just shield. And he doesn't necessarily have a counter to that other than to dash grab himself. And so from there, his counter, it just goes back to he has to go for a positional counter by setting up anyways, which comes down to, is there a hitbox or no? And so these are just a couple of different layers, or a few different layers of 50-50s of hitbox or no is the answer to every single flowchart there. And so the idea is Game & Watch essentially requires you to be exerting no pressure yourself in order to set up his own pressure. And if you are setting up your own pressure, are you doing so in a way that execution checks, does this lose to up B for free? And so most characters that are viable are going to be able to interact with Game & Watch's shield in a way that does not lose to up B automatically, including characters with lower range like Fox. Like Fox is fast enough that he can even do something like leapfrog in and then shield behind Game & Watch, so that he is going to be in a more traditional ultimate position of, I'm shielding behind you, I can shield grab you, but you can't shield grab me. Now what? Where are we at? And so at that point, Game & Watch has to start preemptively at being, in which case you can just view, as we said before, 50-50. Is there a hitbox or not? And now Fox can start like short hop down airing, short hop nairing into Game & Watch's shield, and sometimes it's actually going to win. because Game & Watch is reacting to the actual jump squad of Fox because he can't afford to wait and be lazy with his up Bs and react late. So you can enforce your own pressure on Game & Watch this way, and Game & Watch's movement stats are above average for sure, but when you start comparing it with a lot of the top tier characters, he's usually going to be the slower character in most positions. And so from that point on, it's just a matter of him using things like Dash Shield, not because Dash Shield is good, but because how does this throw off the delicate balance of your execution checks of how you were interacting with his shield? If you were interacting on the intention that he was standing still, then you're now going to be misspaced fundamentally. If he had dash shielded before then, it's what if Game & Watch was a completely different place? And so usually what you'll see here is as we are seeing Game & Watches develop, we are seeing them focus more on movement and less on static defenses. Mia being the most obvious example because he doesn't even really hold shield, and when you see his shields, it's generally him fishing for parries and using that in conjunction with the Nair out of shield option select. And he won't stop moving. Everything is just either parries and Nairs, and then occasionally he'll hard commit to a shield, but when you see him hard commit, he will hard commit to it. So the as Charles mentioned, Game & Watch Warrior is fake. Already talked about how you can go in there. Generally, even when he's pursuing you to get a falling forward air, keep in mind, if you are not moving your hurt box to meet his hurt box, then he had to move his face into you wherever he's going to place that bomb. And so by definition, if you had pressed a button, falling forward air did not work. It relies on you having no hitboxes there. Everything is a 50-50. Was there a hitbox for me to set up or to stop me from setting up? If no, I can set up. If there is, okay, are you whiffing in a way that I can whiff punish? Because he can't do it on his own. So, as Ramses mentioned, Game & Watch is a fairly low control character. So he's controlling in the sense that everything he does is based around stopping your game plan from working.
Yeah.
And he is a low control character in the sense that how the game is going to progress is generally not in the Game & Watch's player's choice. It's based on whoever is opposing the Game & Watch, and then Game & Watch is going to essentially work with them. It's like a judo toss. So
it is. I think Game & Watch, again, he wins when you fuck up your execution or when he gets a read. And so him getting a read is contingent on the information you give to Game & Watch. And him punishing your execution is contingent on your execution. And so you're almost always in control, of course, barring some matchups, but generally you're in control versus Game & Watch. It's just that executing on that control is hard. That's my interpretation.
Ultimate's a hard game.
It is. Yeah, people are still misinputting. We're 5 years in. Love the buffer system. Make a new game, Nintendo. Lower input delay, please.
Yeah, I think.
What's funny?
Oh, go ahead.
This is just I digress, but I was talking with a friend the other day, and he's like a Guilty Gear Strive player, and I was core landing fair. And so technically core and landing fair is like reactable to DI2 because it's like 9 frames startup, 12 frames hit stop, which is like 21 frames, technically reactable. And so he was like, yeah, you can react to that. And I was like, well, I mean, it's ultimate. It's like barely reactable. Like on anticipation, you can. And so he was like, wait, 20 frames is barely reactable? Oh, this game.
And then you have to explain the input lag.
Yeah, six frames input delay, baby. 6 frames.
Pretty sure Strive Wi-Fi has less delay than Ultimate offline.
Yeah,
basically,
Rip so to people.
Shout out to Rollback.
Rub it in, Tony. Shout out to Rollback. Hey, we should be playing Brawl again. It's getting Rollback, right?
Oh, is it?
I don't know anything about that.
It is. That's We'll be back on the 6, baby.
But yeah, I think for Game & Watch, what frustrates most players is that they have to play slow because I feel like most players it feels good pressing buttons in any fighting game. Pressing your buttons, pressuring, having it be your turn. But I think against Game & Watch, again, this is why I think it makes a lot of people just better players because most people don't play the slow play style, right? Where it's like, because when you approach into Game & Watch, he's so broken. It's so hard to actually approach into Game & Watch because he's like covering the air with Nair. He has the shield, up B out of shield and stuff. But when you force Game & Watch to have to somewhat approach into you and you play that slow game, that's why Game & Watch really can't control the pace. Whereas Fox, usually controls the pace, right? Because Fox is the one outspeeding you. He's the one, like, if you outspeed someone, you choose where the interactions happen.
Yep.
The other player might be able to pick the options in those RPS situations, but the other character can force RPS, right? So you might not win the RPS, but you can force when and where it happens, right? Whereas Game & Watch, I don't think he's a character that's like forcing RPS scenarios whenever he pleases, in neutral at least, right? Like obviously he has RPS situations, but you have to play the slow game, and that's why some people even get bored of playing Game & Watch, because it is a very slow paced game style, right? And then it also forces the opponent to do that too, which is why sometimes people don't like watching it or playing against it. But like I said, I think it helps sharpen a lot of fundamental skills, where it's like you don't, like, if I'll just use myself as an example. It's like, okay, I can't just have Fox Nair bail me out every single time in a scramble, right? Like sometimes I have to disengage with rolls. Sometimes I have to just super get out of there with any other option and disengage the scramble and reset it back to like where I can try to whiff punish and stuff like that. And I will say, if you can whiff punish Game & Watch, you can whiff punish any character in the game. So if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball type thing. So if you really, again, it's just, I love Ramses's explanation of the reason why Game & Watch is good. It's not because the tools are strong, but it's more of just how hard it is to punish said tools. The execution check, right? And when you're the execution check in tournament, that's exactly what you want. Because it's like, oh, you're nervous, or you're tilted, or something's going on, or you didn't get much sleep last night, or whatever, right? Like when you're the hardest execution check character in the game, or like maybe second hardest, bar to Steve or whatever. But yeah, I think that's
there's a few. Kazuya, Steve,
right.
Sonic to some degree.
Right, but the great thing about Game & Watch is your offense is not that crazy of an exeqution check. At least when Kazuya is doing the combo to me, I'm like, at least you have to be in training mode or whatever, and then you execute it in tournament.
Game & Watch is just pressing there.
Game & Watch is just naring the shit out of me. Like, I mean, you just
Mia's mashing sometimes, but that's also why we're starting to see him lose to people who then immediately go on and lose to Meister, because Meister's like, no, I'll commit to the bit.
No, that's exactly it.
All right, so that was a fantastic episode. I hope you guys learned a bunch about counterplay from Game & Watch
and tilting.
Yes,
and tilting.
Thank you for
Game & Watch question.
Amazing question. But yeah,
dude, it's funny. It's related.
It is very related. Yeah.
Oh, it's been related.
What a crazy lineup.
Maximum, dude.
If you guys did enjoy the content, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, rate us on Spotify. And if you want to support us even more, go ahead and subscribe to the Discord to ask us questions just like Alto did. So until next time, class dismissed.